Welcome to Off Script with Dan Dwyer on Robin Hood Radio, featuring in-depth interviews with guests from the world of theater and allied arts. Underwriting support from Johnny Cake Books in Salisbury, Connecticut, whose collection of rare, collectible, and out-of-print books is housed in a 19th century cottage in one of the most old-fashioned small towns in New England. And now, here's the host of Off Script, Dan Dwyer.
Okay, thanks, Marshall. Today, I'm thrilled to have as my guest on Off Script one of the most prolific and accomplished figures in American musical theater, Jonathan Tunick. Name some of the most popular Broadway musicals of the last 50 years, and you run a good chance that Jonathan Tunick orchestrated it or served as its musical director. He's especially known for his collaboration with Stephen Sondheim, having orchestrated such shows as Company, Follies, A Little Night Music, Pacific Overtures, Sweeney Todd, Merrily We Roll Along, Into the Woods, and Passion. Other shows he's orchestrated include Promises, Promises, Nick and Nora, Titanic, for which he got the first Tony Award for orchestrations, and a little musical you might have heard of called A Chorus Line. Jonathan is one of only 15 people with EGOT status, E-G-O-T, winning an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony. And I'm thrilled to have him with us today. Welcome, you. Jonathan.
It's good to be here.
Well, thank you for coming in.
It was a long trip, you know.
Yeah, I know that. We just, not no secret that you spend a lot of part-time in these parts of the woods. Mm-hmm. So thanks. It's a corny question, but let's go back to the beginning. Did you always want to be an orchestrator? I mean, as a kid, were you a musical kid?
Well, when I was about 8 years old, our grade school teacher would play us records like Tubby the Tuba, and I got the idea from these children's records, Peter and the Wolf, that musical instruments could play characters and tell stories, and it became the obsession of my life. I became obsessed with the idea of musical instruments. I came to love them and be fascinated by them, and that's
so. What was the first musical instrument as a kid that you picked up? Playing?
I had an uncle who was an amateur clarinet player, so it was a no-brainer to my parents. I got a free horn and free lessons. After a few months, my uncle thought I was ready for a real teacher and turned me over to a man named Harold Freeman, who was the second clarinet of the NBC Symphony. And I took lessons from him from the time I was about 11 into high school.
I gather you grew up in Manhattan.
Oh, yeah.
You're a New Yorker. Okay.
I'm a native West Sider.
All right. Good.
And that was my ex.
Did you go to a performing arts high school at the time?
I went to the High School of Music and Art,
there you were.
Which has since morphed into the LaGuardia School.
That's great. So you also have another local connection besides being a part-time resident. You went to Bard.
I went to Bard.
What was it like in those days?
It was a very small and rather bohemian school in the 50s when I went there. I was fortunate to have terrific music teachers there. The music faculty was only 3 people. And I studied composition with Paul Nordhoff, who is not a well-known composer, but a very good one, and was a great teacher. I still remember him with great warmth.
What was the first time you orchestrated somebody else's work? I mean, you were playing instruments, clarinet. Mm-hmm. You were composing on your own. You were learning how to compose. When did you take somebody else's stuff and make it sing? Like
many of us musical kids, we had little dance bands while we were still teenagers. And I got it into my head that I wanted to write my own arrangements for my band. So I bought a little book, followed the directions, And to my amazement, it came out sounding more or less like music.
So this was a garage band, as it were, that you took around?
As it were, but we didn't have garages in Manhattan, but
right.
It was more living rooms.
And what about college productions up at Bard?
I wrote musicals at Bard. These were accompanied by my rather inept piano playing. It wasn't until I was out of Bard and doing graduate work at Juilliard that I got my first job as an arranger. This was at a summer resort in Pennsylvania called Tamiment, where the entertainment for the guests consisted of an original musical every Saturday night. There was a complete staff of actors, singers, dancers, comics, composers, comedy writers, a conductor, a designer. It was a little theater company. I applied for a summer job playing in the orchestra. The leader said, "What I really need is an arranger." So I volunteered that I was a composition major and had some experience arranging, but I hadn't really done anything. Well, he couldn't find anybody, and I had him over a barrel. I got the job by default.
I went back to Wikipedia, as everyone does when we do research for these kinds of interviews. It identifies your first stage musical as Take 5 in 1957.
Oh.
Did that come out? Is that true, number one?
Here's how that happened.
Yeah, because a lot, just because it's on Wikipedia doesn't mean it's true, but anyway.
Yeah. Take 5 was not a musical. It was a show at a nightclub called either the Upstairs at the Downstairs or the Downstairs at the Upstairs, something like that. Produced by,
that in itself sounds like that comes out of a Broadway musical, but anyway.
Produced by a very interesting character named Julius Monk.
Yeah.
And it was a review.
Uh-huh.
He would buy review material from various writers. I specifically remember Sheldon Harnick contributing material to Julius Monk and Harvey Schmidt and Tom Jones. My collaborator, whose name was Stephen Viniver, Stephen died young on the verge of a brilliant career as a director. Was very ambitious, and he brought some of our material from the Bard show to an agent who got a few songs into the Julius Monk review.
The Stage 5. Take 5. The Take 5.
Take 5 was the name of it.
So were you still at Bard when Take 5 happened, or was it shortly after you was?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're a student at Bard. You got a good gig. You got your stuff into something that's really being staged in New York, correct?
Well, my royalties would have bought dinner.
Right. So what do you do after you graduate from Bard? Do you head back to Manhattan and start composing again?
I went on to graduate work at Juilliard.
Juilliard, right?
Where I spent another 3 years.
Right.
Studying composition and really getting my chops together.
Right. Right. In case you're just joining us, my guest is Jonathan Tunick. If you haven't heard about Jonathan, you've heard of many of the Broadway musicals, award-winning musicals that he's orchestrated, Little Night Music, Pacific Overtures, A Chorus Line, Titanic, etc. So you're at Juilliard, you're right in the mix of things. Are you still composing and and arranging and getting stuff done on the side while you're going to school, or what's going on?
Okay. I was doing all kinds of work. I was a journeyman woodwind player, summer stock conductor, vocal coach, arranging for nightclub acts. They had that then.
Right.
And there were little shows, children's shows and industrial shows that you could get your feet wet doing. And learning in the street, as it were. At the same time, I'm getting my academic chops organized, although I never followed that up.
Well, your portfolio of Broadway success is just incredible. So having ended up at the top of the heap, I guess the obvious question is, and having done all this journeyman work that you're now describing in New York while you're going to graduate school, what was your big break?
I would have to say Tamiment.
Yeah.
I was just thrown in feet first into writing the orchestrations for a fairly good-sized orchestra. We had 16 players. I do shows with half of that now.
So this is back in the Borscht Belt. Can we call it that?
Well,
yeah,
it
not
wasn't,
a little.
the
More,
Borscht Belt was further north,
Okay.
in Sullivan County
All
in
right.
New York. This was the Poconos.
okay, so it's a little more.
I don't know that it makes any difference culturally.
Well, so was it more sophisticated fare? You can tell
Well,
us.
this was a different.
Okay.
It was a different milieu.
Okay.
They were making original reviews that were. They were a little more high toned.
Okay.
Than the Borscht Belt was nightclub acts.
All right. So what was? It's interesting to me that you say your first big break was really hands-on work and doing that work in the summer. But I guess my question is, what was the first Broadway show that you orchestrated or composed that really put your name in lights or put you on the roster of people that now we're going to turn to if we're doing a big Broadway show?
Okay. Well, let's get one thing out of the way.
Okay.
I've never composed a Broadway show,
Okay.
and I never will.
Okay. That's another question I have, but maybe we'll get to that.
The first Broadway show that I orchestrated that was a major credit that actually had my name on it.
Yeah.
Because I did a lot of ghosting in
Sure.
the 60s.
Sure.
It was Promises. If you're really scanning the Wikipedia, you'll see other credits that preceded it. But these were shows that, for one reason or another, didn't get any further than having the poster on the wall at Joe Allen's, if anyone knows what that means. For anybody who doesn't know what that means, it means the show didn't run any longer than a week.
Right.
Promises was the first honest-to-goodness Broadway musical that I orchestrated and got credit for.
You got credit. Can we jump up to a company, okay? Promises was roughly 64, I think?
Not that early.
Was it?
69. It opened in 69.
So company followed, right?
Yeah.
Had you met, and that was, Sondheim had done other stuff before company. That's,
sure.
In terms of the popular knowledge, probably the one that he's first remembered for.
Right.
What was the connection between working on Promises, and Company? Because there were other principals involved in that, like Michael Bennett and Bob Avian, who did the dance for Promises, and went on to Company.
Well, they all put in a good word for me.
Yeah, so my question is, were you part of that mix, or had you met Sondheim separately?
Both. Both.
Yeah.
I had met Sondheim through a mutual friend, a composer, very fine composer, named David Shire.
Oh, sure.
And David and I were and remain very close friends. And he thought that Steve, we should meet each other, and made the connection. And my name came up when Company was getting organized, and I got the job.
Mm-hmm. So we were talking a little bit before the broadcast. It's such, I hate to use this expression, iconic musical, but it is. Many of us know it by heart. The orchestrations were really distinctive at the time. What I remember seeing in the original was that constant theme of the busy signal that was incorporated into the score. Did you come up with that? Did Sondheim write it, or did you, apropos of your telling us that you wanted to find characters in the music, how did that happen?
Well, it originated with Sondheim. In fact, the script tells us that the first music that you hear in the opening number is a busy signal, literally.
But does it tell us it's music? Because it's incorporated into the music. It's not just a busy signal.
Then I picked up on it and started exploiting it. And varying it and making a leitmotif of it, which means it's a recurring fragment of music that recurs throughout the show.
It does constantly throughout.
So he started it. I continued it.
Has anybody, now I'm just really talking off the top of my head, has anybody made the analogy between the busy signal in Company and the steam pipe that goes off in Sweeney Todd?
No, nobody has.
But you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because it is sort of, if you go to Sweeney Todd.
It is an analogy, sure.
Yeah, but it isn't, that steam pipe is almost a
the,
note.
The whistle, you mean?
Yeah, the whistle, whatever it was. Was it the factory whistle or the
steam? The
factory whistle. I know
it was an actual factory whistle that was rigged up to compressed air device.
So did you regard that as part of the sound design, or is it part of the music?
It's not
part
really
of the score.
part of the music.
Okay.
But the busy signal, does anyone remember a busy signal? There are a lot of
except for those of us who saw Company in 1970.
There are a lot of anachronisms in Company now. It's become something of a period piece because of its up-to-date character at the time. A certain amount in the music too. It was very Bacharackian in a way.
Yeah, but it got a little bit beyond Bacharach, didn't it? Because there was an electronic kind of quality to it, I think, as I recall. There was electricity about it.
Well, you're probably referring to the electric keyboard that's in the orchestra that was featured in the song Another 100 People. And I get a lot of questions to this day about what was the instrument that you used? We want to get that. And my answer is, well, I just used what was available then. They have much better instruments now.
Is that the first time you used it? Is that the first time you used that instrument?
No.
No.
It really wasn't.
But it really worked.
It was an instrument called the Roxachord, and it was an early electric keyboard instrument, and we used it because Hal Prince owned one.
And he said, "Here, use this,
he said,
I can bring one in tomorrow."
Yeah, here, kid, we have this in the basement. Use it, because I don't have to buy another one.
So there's so many great scores besides the Sondheim stuff that you've done, and this is a really corny question. I could say, what is your favorite, or I could say, what is the music that you've orchestrated that you're most proud of, or if there's any one of these that you want to be remembered by, if it's not the body of your work, what is it?
Hard to answer.
Yeah, of course it is.
And you'll have asked this question of other people, and you probably got the same answer from everybody. It's like having to choose between your children.
Your favorite kids, yeah.
I will say that I love Company for its innovations and just the sheer excitement of it. We don't remember now how innovative it was at the time. Even I, working on this, I said, I never heard music like this before. I can't use the old cliches, the orchestra devices that you would use on a standard score. Every song had to have a style created for it, almost everyone. Yeah. And of course now all those innovations have sort of receded now into the general language, musical language now, and we've forgotten how new and vibrant and exciting they were at the time. You move on to Follies.
Oh, brilliant.
And just the personal insights into personal growth. I've invented a cliche about Follies, which is that you see Follies when you're 30 and you say, look at those terrific kids and look how they screwed up their lives, and look at the cute old people. You see it when you're 50 and you say, look at those complex middle-aged people and their problems, and look how stupid and callow and they were when they were young. And look at the cute old people. Then you see Follies when you're 70, and you say, look at those hip old people.
Wow, they're really smart.
Well, they are.
Of course.
You come to realize that it's the old people in Follies that have come to terms with life, especially Weissman. I think it's no no accident that he was named with a Dickensian name, Weissman, wise man.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one who keeps saying, he says it over and over, I know when things are over.
And he's seen it all and done it all.
Yeah.
And it's as is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
he's a happy man.
That's right. Right. And he's still sort of, at least in the most recent production I've seen, still trying to slap the make on the young chorus girls.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
no, it's great.
No, the old ones.
And the old ones, too. No, but there's a young woman
Not
that
the
he
young
tries
ones.
to...
The old thing, he sticks to ladies his own age.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so besides Company and
then
Follies...
a little night music is the ultimate romantic comedy, and so beautifully put together. It's like a Swiss watch.
Yeah, yeah.
Then Pacific Overtures it speaks for itself. It's hard to categorize it and it's hard to analyze it, but there was something about its exotic and powerful nature that brought out the best in all of us.
Yeah.
We were all dragged into it kicking and screaming. Like, how am I going to do a Japanese musical? I don't know anything about Japanese culture. And an interesting thing is, I have a very good friend who is a Japanese composer, and he loves Pacific Overtures. He feels respected by it. I find that very satisfying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In case you've just joined us, the guest, Jonathan Tunick, he's talking now about his collaborations with Stephen Sondheim, having orchestrated such Broadway musical classics as Company, Follies, A Little Night Music, Pacific Overtures, and at the risk of embarrassing Mr. Tunick, again, I will mention he's only one of 15 people with an EGOT, an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony. You talked about Company, you talked about Follies, talked about Sweeney Todd, obviously.
Well, we're up to Sweeney Todd.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about Sweeney Todd.
Well, wouldn't you say that it's the ultimate achievement in musical drama?
I would.
Musical
I
theater.
would. It's my favorite Sondheim, and I think it's one of the best musical
and that's
things
the
I've ever
reason.
seen.
The reason
Epic.
is that it's great theater.
Yeah.
The question comes up: is it an opera? I don't think it is. It shares certain qualities with opera, such as he uses classical forms. There are rondo forms. There are. Well, he uses a rondo form particularly in several of the numbers, and other classical forms. I've gotten into this subject now that's going to be hard to get out of.
That's okay.
Is it an opera? Is it not? Is it important?
Right. It's not important, I guess.
It
Although we talked before, Sondheim has been in a public talkback after the Glimmerglass production of Sweeney a couple of years ago, and he definitively said, "You can do with my work what you want, but I write for musical theater.
Yeah.
You can, and it doesn't matter. You're right." When I first met you, we had an off-end conversation, I think at a party, and I mentioned a specific Sondheim musical, which we don't have to name, or you might when I ask the question. There are some lousy musicals that have some great scores. Can you name a few? Without denigrating the lousy musical, but have you, what you've worked on, say, this is a fabulous score, and then you're so disappointed that the play itself didn't make it?
Well, I go to all the encores, dress rehearsals, so I have great exposure to both sides of that question.
Right.
Then there are the great shows with so-so scores.
Exactly. Yeah.
I remember specifically Cole Porter's "Out of This World,"
Yeah.
which has a great score. Several shows that I did. There's you mentioned Nick and Nora.
Yep.
Why did you mention, of all those shows, Nick and Nora? Well, it has a really good score.
Yeah, because it does. It's a great score.
You can sit and listen to it and wonder, gee, I wonder why this didn't make it.
So which category would you put Merrily? We roll along in.
Great score.
It's a wonderful score. Yeah.
Great score. And just a flawed book.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that it's not good or it's terrible or anything, but it's flawed. It's got flaws of construction and flaws in its conception. In my opinion, it has a central character who is passive.
Yeah.
And we just can't commit ourselves to him.
Yeah.
The backwards thing doesn't help, but
Yeah.
that's not really it.
Jonathan, we could go on forever about this.
Don't you wish it
I
could
wish
go on forever?
I would, thank you. I want to thank you so much for coming in. It's been a thrill to meet you again and to talk with you. And I want to thank you from all of us for your contributions.
Well, thank you
for so
too,
many
Dan.
pleasant evenings many of us have had at the theater. And thank you all for listening. The program Off Script, underwritten by Johnny Cake Books in Salisbury. Until the next time you tune in, be well.
Underwriting support for Off Script with Dan Dwyer from Johnny Cake Books in Salisbury, Connecticut, whose collection of rare, collectible, and out-of-print books is housed in a 19th century cottage in one of the most old-fashioned small towns in New England. Off Script with Dan Dwyer is also available via podcast on our on-demand page, robinhoodradio.com. Click on On Demand, and then click on Off Script with Dan Dwyer.